Hey everyone, thank you all for joining. This is our September office hour. It's an open forum, so everyone get your questions ready. We're here for you, and we want to get as many questions answered as we can. To do this, on the GoToWebinar little section, you can click raise your hand, and at that point, I'll be able to unmute your microphone so you can ask a question. Our presenters today are going to be Sarah, Luke, and Keith. Awesome. So to start us off, one of the questions that we do get asked a lot is if a user is running a performance test that has a 100% error rate, with the errors all being reported as a non-HTTP socket exception, what's going on?
All right, I'll take this one. That primarily tends to indicate that there's an issue with whitelisting. The IP addresses that the requests are being made from the BlazeMeter side. We run into this a lot. People will validate their tests locally, which run and make requests from within their own network, and they, everything shows up as green. Think the test is fine, and then you run it from BlazeMeter, which is an external cloud-based network, and then you start running into these socket exceptions. And that's because the network security policies on the application side haven't been updated to allow the requests to come in from an external network. There's a variety of different reasons why this might happen, but it all boils back down to network security. This is resolved in one of three ways, or a combination. The first solution would be to whitelist the publicly available IPs, which we have guides on how to do this. That solution is a little cumbersome, but it's the free solution that we offer. And then you can also use dedicated IPs, which is a lot more simple and straightforward, but is a paid solution. And then you can use, if you have a qualifying plan, you can use private locations, which will basically, you set up a load generator within your own network that makes requests from there and bypasses the security policy. Any additional questions on that one?
Just wanted to add a little bit of color to that. So the first part about whitelisting the public locations, why it's cumbersome. So you basically would have to whitelist a very large or very wide block of addresses in Google or Amazon, which from a security standpoint you might not want to do because you're going to be whitelisting things that aren't necessarily BlazeMeter also. So the better approach would be to go the dedicated IPs route, because you get a set of IPs, you know what those IPs are, and you can give those to your network guys and they can do what they need to do over there. Or you could do the on-premise location solution, which is setting up and running load generators directly within your network. Okay.
Yeah, and one thing to note, if you are on one of the digital plans, the only option available is that whitelisting that Luke was talking about with the guide. If you're on one of the enterprise plans, then you have the option to do the dedicated IPs or the on-premise solution.
Perfect. And it looks like we just got a question from Nilesh Kumar that says, how do you add weights while recording test scripts through BlazeMeter?
There's a few ways you can do that. If you are doing your script through our recorder and you download it and open it in JMeter, you can add it there in your actual transaction controllers. You can also do it through, if you're doing like a Selenium test, you can add weights there. The recorder by default will add a weight based on how long it took you to do it during the recording, but that's going to be a pretty stagnant time. It's not going to have any wiggle room. So if you want to better represent how your users would be waiting in real time, you can add two options. You can have like the constant timer, and you can also have the additional weight on top of that.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Oh, do you have anything else to add, Keith?
I was just going to say that BlazeMeter itself, like in the UI, there's not a place to do that. You would have to use the recorder and then take the recorder's output and then tweak that yourself to your liking. So it really gives you the most control that way, because you have to have some knowledge about the about the Taurus YAML that you're using and or the JMX that you're using, a JMeter, but you really do have the most control that way. Okay.
Yeah, adding either the constant timer or the uniform random timer within your script, if it's a JMeter script, is going to be the easiest and most straightforward way to add wait time.
Perfect. And let's see, one of the other most common questions that we get is if a user ran a load test that stopped producing data prematurely, and the display drops in concurrency and took an extended amount of time to be marked as ended by the system, what happened with that?
I can talk about that if we want. So we get this question a lot, especially with some of like newer customers who've come on and are just starting to run some of their bigger tests. If you're not getting data, or you're getting a big drop in concurrency, or you're starting to get a spike in errors, a lot of times it's due to the engines being overwhelmed. So you can have your test run locally with less users. You can have it run well in BlazeMeter with less users. But when you start to scale up, our engines are a finite amount of space, 2 CPU and 8 gigs of RAM. And so if you don't calibrate the engines for each individual test, you run the risk of having the engines be the bottleneck instead of your application. So you're not actually testing, can your application handle it? You're testing, can the engines handle the amount of load coming through? And so what we recommend is the first time you upload a script to BlazeMeter, run a debug test just to make sure it works and you're not getting a bunch of errors. And then you can run a regular smaller test. And then if you want to run anything really over about 500 users, you'll want to calibrate. And so what you can do is you can run a pretty long test, maybe like 50 minutes, but make most of it the ramp up time. So like 40 minutes of the 50 minutes can be ramp up. And that means that the 500 users you're adding will take a really long time to add. And you can have them all on one engine. And you can actually monitor the engine health tab on the reporting section in BlazeMeter and see exactly where the engines start to get overloaded. And so we tend to give the benchmark of about 75% for the CPU and memory. And so if you're looking at that graph, you don't want either of those to get above about 75%. And so if you see that it's getting above that, you can go to the summary page and you can see how many users were actually in the system at that point. And then that is kind of your breaking point. And so then you could go back to your test and then drop that maximum number of users per engine to that number or slightly below. And that should prevent that calibration issue. Does that make sense? Anything to add, Luke or Keith?
Yeah. Just generally bear in mind that it's not just the function of the number of users that's going to tear down an engine. It's a function of what your test is doing, and how your application works. And of course, no two applications are the same, no two tests are the same. So it's really on the end user to understand, or the tester rather, to understand those pieces and how they work together. That engine health tab is critical for all of this. Like if you have a doubt about how your test is running, if you see the users drop and the test is taking a long time to finish, first place to check is that engine health tab. And if you see CPU spiked to 100% and flatlined, or memory spiked and to 100% flatlined, you got to calibrate. That's really all this is about. And calibration is just trying to find the baseline configuration for your test that the engine can handle in this configuration. Sarah mentioned that the engines, there are 2 CPU and 8 gigs of RAM. That's roughly M2, if you guys are familiar with Amazon terminology, that's M2.large or equivalent, I guess. And it's running inside of a container. So just keep all of that in mind. Also, if you're testing on your local system is probably beefier, to be honest, than the engines that are here. So just bear all that in mind when you're making a comparison between your local system and running in BlazeMeter. Okay. Okay.
And Keith mentioned a good point. This is something that you have to do for each test. It is very test specific because it is based on how complex your script is, what calls it's making, all of that. It's not just the number of users. So you can't calibrate once and then expect that same number of users to hold true across all of your tests. It is something that you'd want to do on any test script that you are trying to bump up that number of users.
Yeah, a little further on that, the amount of users an engine can handle can vary widely as depending on the executor that you're using. Most commonly we see JMeter, but if you want to use a Selenium executor for a performance test, we see this from time to time. But since Selenium has to basically spin up a browser, a single user will consume much greater amounts of CPU and memory. So I mean, we recommend a maximum of 5 users per engine for Selenium performance tests. So you can imagine that's much different than what you'd see with a typical JMeter test. Also, as they've mentioned, depending on what your test is doing, you'll see much different levels of consumption. If your test is uploading or downloading files, those will be much more resource intensive on the engines. So that's just kind of some things to look out for as you're going through the calibration process.
Awesome, thank you guys. And I just wanted to remind some of our new attendees that you are more than welcome to ask a question by clicking on the little hand by your name, and then I'll be able to unmute your microphone so you can ask your questions. One of the next most common questions that we get is what happens if a user configured a test to run with 500 VUs, but the max users field in the report only says 460 VUs? Users concerned that the test didn't execute properly.
I'll grab this one. Yeah, this is a common one. So there's a difference between what you configured the test as and what you actually get, right? So what you configured the test as, we refer to as the total users that the test is configured for. And logically, you expect that your test is going to hit that. But very often you're going to see a lower number. And why do you see a lower number? It's not because of any fault in BlazeMeter or any fault in your application necessarily, but the way BlazeMeter calculates the number of users, the max users field, is that it's actually looking for concurrent active users. And what does that mean? That literally means users that are doing busy work, not just sitting in a wait loop or something like that, but are actually doing work, making requests to your application. So if you break it down in JMeter terms, JMeter generates a JTL file with all of the metrics, right? And the way we calculate the max users is that we're actually literally looking for data points that are overlapped in time in that JTL. So a lot of the times that number is going to be less than the total users number. If you want to get that max users to be equal to total users, there's a number of ways you can do that. But basically, you want the users to be active at the same time, whatever that means in your application. So for example, if your application, if the transactions in your application are super quick, right, you're not going to have a lot of users active at the same time. But if those transactions take a little bit longer because they're making hits to the database in the back end, and there's some processing that has to happen, if the users linger around longer, that max users number is going to be higher. Okay. Anybody else? Luke, Sarah?
I don't know what I can add to that.
Awesome. So one of the next most common questions that we get is if a user is curious about what the 90% line column on the request stats tabs mean.
So just at a very basic level, in the reporting, we have 90% lines in a lot of places. And 90% just means that 90% of those response times or whatever the particular stat is in the report in your test are less than or equal to that value. So 90% of the statistic, the points of data that came back are going to be at that level or below. And then there's also a 95% line and a 99% line.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Let's see. Okay. Another common question that we get is a user has just purchased a basic plan and wants to run 1,000 user tests, but is receiving the notification engine's greater than the account limit error. What do they do next?
Yeah, that's it's kind of a gotcha, but it's a pretty straightforward solution. So in the UI, you'll see, let me pull it up so make sure I'm saying the right thing. In the load distribution tab in the UI, which is, if you scroll down just under the load configuration tab, you'll see this value that says, typically by default, it says 500 max users per engine. That value, the integer there is blue, which is supposed to indicate that you can click on it, which you can do, and that's how you adjust that value. Now, when it's set that way by default, on a basic plan, you'd only have one load engine available to you. So if you set the amount of users to 1,000 and the max users per engine is set to 500, the system will try to request 2 engines for the test to run with. And that's why you'd be getting that error message. Now you can then go down to that value in the load distribution tab, and you can adjust that up to 1,000. I lost my train of thought. That would allow you to run the test. But keep in mind about calibration. It typically has to be a fairly simple test for an engine to support 1,000 users. Just, yeah, keep that in mind before you attempt to run a test like that.
Yeah, I would say on average, most tests are hanging out around a 200, 250, 275-ish users per engine where it's not getting overloaded. So 500 is already a lot. If you were trying to run 1,000 all on one engine, it would have to be a very simple test for it to not overload those engines. So it's just something to keep in mind if that is something you're trying to do.
Awesome. So it looks like Nilesh has another question. Nilesh, I'm going to unmute you real quickly. And if you would like to talk through any of your questions, you're more than welcome to right now. All right. So it looks like he may have self-muted. So his question is there a report which provides assertion pass results? Under assertion results listener, we get results only when it fails, but doesn't get details of assertions that pass.
So is this a question about like within JMeter itself? Because I know if you have an assertion and then you have the assertion results, the listener, only those failures are going to pop up there, and that's by default in JMeter. It's not going to show you every result for every assertion, but if it's not showing up, it is passing. Is it a JMeter question?
Nilesh, is that a JMeter question? Nilesh, are you there?
I could see Nilesh's mic is green, but yeah, not getting any of the audio.
We may go back to that question. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Okay, we do have another question. This one is from Gatika. So Gatika, let's see. I just sent you an unmute request. You're more than welcome to talk now. There we go.
Hiya. Hello.
Hey there. Yeah, we got you.
Hi. I was just basically I came across this tool recently, and in our organization, we are looking for a tool which can help us do the API testing, web testing, as well as desktop application testing. And I'm just wondering if BlazeMeter helps us with all those sort of areas which we can test. Is that an option?
But believe so. Might need a little more clarity. Let's see. So we do performance testing, functional testing, as well as API monitoring, which can function as API testing as well. Could you give us a little more detail on what you're looking to do?
Yes, performance testing is obviously on the list right now, but as of now, we have the API testing, which is based on the WebSockets, and we are using JMeter. And for the portal, which is like a web-based application, we are using Cypress, but I want to get away with different sort of tools and technologies and just use one tool instead, if there is a possibility to set it up in a way.
It sounds like, yeah. I mean, we might want to recommend you email our sales department. They can do a more in-depth discovery process for you. But if you're using JMeter, BlazeMeter is built to support JMeter, you know, in and out. They kind of pretty much function in lockstep. So if that's what you're using, I highly recommend BlazeMeter for that. And do we support Cypress? We support a wide variety of executors for running different kinds of tests, which we can give you more information on that. And BlazeMeter is kind of built with that intention of bringing all your different testing into one place. So it sounds like we've got what you're looking for.
Cool. Yeah. I'm sorry. I tried to reach out to the sales team, but I think I just got lost with the pricing and a lot of information which was shared. So thought to join the webinar, but I got now. Thank you very much. It's really useful to know that it would basically cater for our needs.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and like Luke mentioned, so the performance testing tab of BlazeMeter is going to be any of your like API calls with your JMeter scripts. The functional tab is more like Selenium or Cypress, I'm guessing. We mostly use Selenium, and we could always help you if you wanted to transform your scripts from Cypress to Selenium. Selenium's really user-friendly, and our recorder will actually create Selenium scripts as well as JMeter scripts. So if you don't already have scripts created and you wanted to make new ones, it's really easy to do with our recorder. And then the other thing Luke mentioned was the API monitoring, which is a separately licensed product, and that's more just for like uptime monitoring to make sure that your application is running as expected. It's less of a testing platform and more of a monitoring platform.
Got you. And would it help to take care of the desktop application testing as well, just the UI part?
There are kind of esoteric ways to do it, but BlazeMeter is predominantly, like if you could test it in JMeter, you can test it in BlazeMeter typically. But it's running in the cloud. You have to keep that in mind, right? It's running in the public internet. It's got to be able to make requests back to your thing that you're testing. Right? If it can get back to the thing that you're testing, then sure, yeah, we can test it. That's really the only caveat. But I mean, it's a pretty big one. There have been folks that have tried to do desktop testing, and again, it is possible. And I think there's a blog article out there on the subject, but it's not at the forefront of what the intent of the platform is. It's more for those web-based applications. Testing at the API level of JMeter, testing at the GUI level with Selenium. And Luke mentioned API monitoring, which is actually a whole other thing. But yeah, okay.
Got you. Thanks, Keith, and
You're
thanks
welcome.
everyone.
And like Keith said, there's a blog on it. Or if you go to blazemeter.com, we have a whole blog section, and you could search for desktop performance testing among other topics. And we do have information on how to do it and what you'll need.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Perfect. All right, I'm seeing another question from Upendar popping up. Upendar, would you like to talk through this problem?
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for arranging the session. I'm using BlazeMeter like 5 years now. So sometimes I see issues with recording transactions. Like per se, I recorded 12 transactions, and after exporting, I'm missing couple of them. I mean, it's not happening regularly, but sometimes. So is there did you guys aware of this issue, or this is particular to me?
Is this while you're using the BlazeMeter recorder?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going through and it's not catching some
Yeah.
of the transactions you're doing?
Yes. So I'm manually doing again, like I'm going to network tab and capturing that again. So I know this is really helpful, the BlazeMeter recorder, but I wanted to avoid that occurrences too. So I thought, I mean, when you export, you can select the domains, right? Like filter domains. But even after selecting all the domains, I'm missing the transactions. So, I mean, I'm curious, it's my side issue, or, it's you guys are aware of this issue in general?
Not in
haven't heard of
general,
it,
but
yeah.
you're using the recorder. Are you using the Chrome extension in the browser for the recording, or are you doing the recording some other way in BlazeMeter?
It's a Chrome one.
Using Chrome, right? Okay, so you're all up to date on that, right? Yeah. So I don't know your application, but the recorder, right? It's only going to be capturing web traffic, like HTTP, HTTPS traffic. Anything else that might be going on in there, it's not going to capture. That's the only thing that's top of mind for me that I can think of. That if you have some other kind of transactions in there that aren't web stuff that you're looking for, that's the only reason, honestly, I can think of why it might not be there.
Mm-hmm. One example might be WebSocket thing.
Yeah, WebSocket thing. Yeah, that recorder is literally only going to be capturing HTTPS, HTTP traffic that the browser is sending in that session that you're recording. Yeah.
That might be them, because we implemented WebSockets in one of the recent projects. So we try to
absolutely.
use. Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely right. So if you have a specific issue that you want us to look into, though, Luke and I are both on the support team. Send us a ticket, and we'll take a look at it closer for you. Okay?
Yeah, sure. We tried that sampler, the WebSocket sampler that JMeter from BlazeMeter provided, but that was not helping our needs. So one of our developers, he built custom WebSocket sampler for me, so that I was using it.
Right on. Yeah, well, we'll take a look at it closer if you send us a ticket, right? And we'll
sure. Yeah, thank you.
We'll help get you on a good path. Anything else for us?
Yeah, that's it for today.
All right, my friend. Thank you.
Just a little note, since Keith brought it up, if you are already in the BlazeMeter platform and you do need to open a support ticket, sometimes it's a little hard to find if you don't know where to look. But on the far right side of the screen, there's a little green box that says Help Center, and then there's an option for a new support ticket.
I created multiple tickets, and your team was helpful in responding.
Great.
Right on. Good.
Awesome. It looks like we got a clarification from Nilesh about his question. So I'll just repeat the question and then I'll go to the clarification. So is there a report which provides assertion pass results? Under assertion results listener, we get results only when it fails, but it doesn't get details of assertions that pass. This is JMeter related.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just how JMeter is set up. It's only going to give you results for a failing assertion, because if it's passing, then it's doing what you're expecting. So it's really only providing more details if your assertion fails, because it wants to tell you why it failed, how it failed, that kind of thing. So there's nothing built in that is going to give you really any more details on if the assertion is passing, because it's just doing what's expected.
Awesome. Okay, let's see if we have any.
Recommendation there. Perhaps look into failure criteria on BlazeMeter, which will give you both positive results and negative.
Yeah, and failure criteria, what Luke is talking about is if you are in the actual BlazeMeter application, there is a section beneath all your load configurations that you can actually put in your specific things that you want to test for. So it could be response times, amount of errors, latency, all kinds of things. And you can put in what that criteria is for failure. So if it's greater than a certain number or percentage. And when you run the test, there will be a separate tab in reporting called failure criteria, and you can actually see the results of those in addition to any like errors that your test might throw.
Yeah. Yeah, and those things will show little green check marks for things that passed and X's, red X's for things that failed. It's pretty visual, yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, and actually, even if you have the assertion results listener in JMeter, when you upload to BlazeMeter, all of your listeners get disabled because we have them on the BlazeMeter side. So that's not going to carry over to BlazeMeter anyway. So you'll get the error report if there are any like legitimate errors like 403s, 500s, that kind of thing that will show up in the error section. And then the failure tab is for anything that you have specifically included in the failure criteria. So it's 2 different ways to kind of monitor how your test is doing.
Just a quick aside, one of the main reasons why the listeners are disabled actually is to conserve processing overhead. Those listeners tend to be a little intensive, and to help you test run with the most resources, those listeners get disabled. BlazeMeter adds its own. It needs a couple to write the JTL files, namely the KPI JTL and the error JTL, but the other ones, yeah, they just get disabled. Okay.
Awesome. And it looks like I'm seeing another question, Nilesh. Nilesh, I'm going to send you an unmute request. So if you'd like to ask it, you're more than welcome to. Nilesh, are you there? I can see your microphone turn green. Looks like we're having some trouble hearing you. So the question from Nilesh is, it looks like sometimes the JMX test script fails on JMeter, but it works on the debugging tool under BlazeMeter. Do you have any tips for that?
Could we perhaps get a little bit more detail? So it's failing on JMeter, but it's passing in a debug test run in BlazeMeter?
That's what I'm seeing. Nilesh, can you provide any more further clarification? It looks like he wrote yes.
Okay. That'll be a hard one for us to answer here, because there's probably specific reasons for it that would require us to take a look. Now, it can be tricky for us to understand why a local JMeter test run is failing, because we won't have visibility into your local environment. So if it's passing on BlazeMeter, things to check are, for instance, if you are, say you're running that test and you're working remotely, and it fails when you run it from your machine, but it passes when you run it from BlazeMeter, that could be a whitelisting issue. And that the IP addresses from BlazeMeter are whitelisted, but yours is not for that kind of access. That's pure speculation though. This might be too much to handle here, but do you know the error that it's failing with when you run it locally?
Let's see. No, he does not have that info.
Okay. Without that error, it can be, and we would just be able to speculate. I would check things like, make sure you have the JMeter plugin manager installed. It's just a basic thing to make sure that it can download the dependencies that it needs. That's a common reason why we'll see local tests fail. If there are dependencies that are not available on jmeterplugins.org, you'll need to make sure that those are properly installed on the system so that JMeter can find them. I would start with checking environment settings like that, just to make sure it's mimicked as it is in BlazeMeter. Take a look at where the test is stored in the test configuration page in BlazeMeter. If there are any jar files there, that indicates a dependency that's not available on jmeterplugins.org. So you need to have that installed manually on your system for it to run. And I'd start with things like that. Without the error, we can only offer suggestions, to be quite honest.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that could have failed, honestly. Again, if you have a specific issue, feel free to just reach out to us directly on the support channels, or in the we also have a community forum. It's a public forum that you can post there, and the community can help out with your issue as well. Okay.
Yeah, since that's a JMeter specific question, I'd recommend to start with the JMeter community, and we can make sure that the link to that gets sent out to you. We have experts who moderate that forum who are incredibly knowledgeable about JMeter, so they should be able to get you testing.
Awesome. And it looks like we have a question from Svetlana. So Svetlana, I just unmuted your microphone. Are you there, Svetlana?
I have a question about the permitted number of tests running on BlazeMeter. I've been using your service under, excuse me, under running performance tests. And once it said me I ran out of the quantity of permitted free tests. Are you going to increase someday the amount of tests?
You're on a free plan, is that right?
Yes, I'm on a free plan.
Yeah, just looking you up actually. Yeah, so the free plan comes with 10 tests right now. We don't know of any plans in the future of them changing that. It's been like that for quite a while, actually. But those renew every month, right? That's a monthly allotment, right? So, and that's any test run that you do over there. But you were saying, you started by saying you hit some kind of other limit. Did I hear that right? Or is it just about the test limit that you had run
It's
10
about the
or?
test. It's about the test limits. Is it
Okay.
about per month or in general?
It's per month. It's per month. Yeah. So
It's
so
per month. So
they'll,
next month I would
next month you should
be
expect to get 10 more.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. It's
And
going,
other
if you
than
go,
that, your service. Excuse
if you
me?
go to your if you go to your billing page on your account, you can see when it renews, and that's when you'll get a new set of 10, right? So depending on when you actually signed up and started that that plan on that account, that's your billing cycle, and you'll get a new set on that day every month. Okay.
Okay. Other than that, your service served me a good
Good.
service.
Excellent.
Glad to hear
Happy
it.
to help.
Thank
Thank you for the kind words. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Svetlana. We just got a question from Nasir. Nasir, I'm going to request to unmute yourself. So you're more than welcome to talk right now to ask your question.
Hey guys, my question, I'm a newbie for one thing, so I'm just starting out learning the ropes. So I have a question regarding JMeter users versus BlazeMeter users. So say in JMeter I put 10 users in my thread group, and then I go to BlazeMeter and put 25 EU. How does that correlation, like, does that supersedes the JMeter users, or what? What's the correlation there?
Yeah, so BlazeMeter is going to override your JMeter settings if you put it in on BlazeMeter. So whatever you put in for the number of threads, the amount of time, the ramp up, all of that will supersede what you have in your JMeter script. If you do not want that to happen, you can disable the load configuration section. There's little toggles next to each of the options. And if you toggle all of them off, it disables the load configuration section in BlazeMeter, and then it will use what your JMeter is set up to do. So we do have a lot of customers who will do that because they have more complex setups where maybe they're using an ultimate thread group and they have 100 users come on for 10 minutes, and then they add another 300, and then they add another 600, and then they back it back down, and they do some like spike testing. So if you have a more complex setup like that, you can have that specified in JMeter, and you can just disable the load configuration section in BlazeMeter, and it'll use that. But if you have anything enabled on the BlazeMeter side, it is going to override your JMeter settings for the load.
Oh, okay, including the timers and JMeter, that will override that too?
Not
No,
the timers within the test, no. But
Okay,
like the
okay.
time it takes to ramp up your test and the time that your test runs for.
Right, that configuration section. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Add a little bit more color. So by override, what we mean is JMeter or BlazeMeter is actually rewriting your JMX to some extent. It's going to take like the total number of users and the duration and the ramp up stuff, and it's actually going to tweak your thread groups. Most of the time, it's actually going to change those thread groups entirely and change them over to what is known as a concurrency thread group, because with the CTG, as we call it, it's efficient at maintaining load. You can shape it so the ramp up has steps, whereas like the plain vanilla thread group, you can't do that, as precisely as you might want. But again, it's just touching the thread groups, right? As Sarah mentioned, you can disable all of those overrides. There's like 5 of them in the UI. There's 5 little toggles for different things. If you turn all of those off, BlazeMeter won't touch your JMX except for the duration, because your plan has a max duration for your tests. It's not going to let you run longer than that, and it has to enforce that. So whatever your planned duration is, that's the absolute max that you can run it for. But otherwise, your test will run as you wrote it, so long as you turn off all of those toggles. Okay, makes sense?
Okay, got it. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Yeah, this is last bit of color on that. Probably more than you asked for, but for everyone here, if you want to know specifically what BlazeMeter did to the JMX after the test is run, go to the logs tab in the test report, and then download the artifacts.zip. When you unzip that, you'll see a file in there that says modified, and then there'll be an underscore, and then it'll be the name of your JMX. That is the file that BlazeMeter executes at runtime, if you have the toggles turned on. So if you ever have questions about, what did BlazeMeter change, you can go check that file and you can specifically see what it did.
Awesome, thank you guys. Let's see. All right, another common problem that happens is a user ran a load test that took a while to boot up, but then it ended without producing any data. What should they do?
There's several things that could be at fault there. So that's first thing I'd say is to open the support ticket. When that happens, that's what we're here for. Things to keep in mind, if the test is running with private locations, check the status of the private location first and foremost if it ends with no data. I just looked at the sheet, but there are network issues that can cause this to happen. Now, the answer here is to check the logs tab and make sure that there's not a hard-coded file path for the CSV. So that's one of the first things to check. So you go to the logs tab, you check the bzt.log file, and in there you should see pretty clearly whether or not BlazeMeter was able to find the CSV. And that's something we see fairly commonly. So to add some color to that, in the CSV dataset config, in JMeter, when you run it locally, you'll have to have a file path that directs JMeter to where the file is on your local system. When you upload it to BlazeMeter, if that file path is still in the JMX, BlazeMeter won't be able to find the CSV, even if it's uploaded along with the test. So what you'll need to do is remove the file path and just have the file name, and BlazeMeter will do the rest and be able to know where that file is.
And that's a really good use case for doing a debug test before running a bigger test, because a debug will catch if you have a path name instead of just the file name for a CSV, or if you have any network issues, and it won't use up any of your test credits.
Yeah, so the CSV thing is actually quite common. It's super common because a lot of times, right, let's say you're on a Windows machine, right, which has different slashes for directories like the backslash, right? And you write in your JMX and you put in this hard-coded path for your CSV, and it's some Windows path, C:\\\, blah, 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 blah. And then you upload that up to BlazeMeter. Well, BlazeMeter is running in containers that are in Linux systems, to be frank. So ideally you want to use, if you can use a path at all, you're going to want to use a relative path, right? With just a directory, a slash, and then the file name. And if you're going to do that, you're going to want to leverage another feature of BlazeMeter, which is this thing called shared folders, right? Which is like a repository of files that you can upload that any of your tests can access, right? So you could, in theory, create a shared folder, put your CSV in there, and then in your test, you're going to reference that directory slash the CSV name, a relative path, which you could easily mimic on your local Windows machine even as well, right? So as long as the structures are analogous, you're fine, right? But you're not going to know when you start your test and it's running, you're not going to know that the CSV is the issue right away. You're going to be staring at the booting page for this test because it's never going to generate data. A very important point here is that booting page doesn't change over to the summary page until your test starts generating data that is actually sent to BlazeMeter's data processing service. If it never changes from the booting page, there's 99% of the time there's an issue with the test, and it's probably something about a CSV that can't be found. And you won't know about that until the test is done and you go and you download the logs, and you either look at the bzt.log, which is actually from Taurus, or the JMeter log, which will probably have repeated exceptions in there about not being able to find the CSV. Okay, it comes up all the time. Just know the key indicator is that it doesn't change from the booting page. It just sits there until the end and you have no data. Okay. All right. Good. With the hand motions, I live in New York, so that's why that is. Okay.
Awesome. So if you guys have any questions, please send them in now. We are about to wrap up. Oh, perfect. I'm seeing another question from Nasir. Let me unmute your microphone. Okay, perfect. All right, you're ready to talk, Nasir.
Okay. Hey guys, the CSV thing, that's very good. Actually, I was thinking about it. Of course, you have a relative path. So you have a shared folder. So I mean, you have to upload the your CSV to the whatever server that BlazeMeter, so it's local to that testing.
Mm-hmm. You don't have to use the shared folders, okay? But you can upload your JMX and your CSV side by side directly in the test configuration, but your JMX then would need to just reference the file name for that CSV, right? Without any path whatsoever. If you want to have it in a path, you just use the shared folder feature and just have that one directory name / blah, whatever your CSV is. And likewise on your local system when you're actually developing that, and you'll be fine. In the interest of transparency, the shared folder mechanism in BlazeMeter doesn't allow for nested folder structure. It only goes one level deep, right? So just a folder name in the file, folder file. That's it. You can't have folder, a whole directory path. That's come up before also, but it's just the way it's designed right now. So it's just very simple, one folder name, bunch of files. Okay. Yeah.
The shared folder option is great if you are using it in multiple places and multiple people are touching it. But if you're just running a test that has a CSV or two that goes with it, and that's the only place you're really using it, you can just upload them directly in the test and have them there, and it'll run exactly as expected as long as you don't have anything other than the file name listed in the JMX.
So when I'm testing on JMeter, for example, I give it a whack relative path, or at that point, like in shared drive to my own drive, whatever, access to that, or I wouldn't do the hard coding, obviously, but still you need to upload the data to that for local JMeter testing. So I would give a relative path and whack, and then later on just upload it to the when I'm testing it, the BlazeMeter.
Yeah, so you'll just need to edit your JMX. So whatever your JMX might have, that your file is stored in your documents / project name / whatever / CSV name. And that works locally for your JMeter script because it can find it on your computer and it can run it from there. But when you upload it to BlazeMeter, even if you literally put the JMX there and you upload the CSV there, BlazeMeter is going to try and follow that path, and it can't find that path to your computer and your file structures. So even though the CSV is included in your test, it's not going to know where to look for it. And so if you just edit your JMX and anywhere you call the CSV, you just list the name of the CSV as it is when you upload it to BlazeMeter, it'll find it and it'll run it from there.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot. I'm not there yet, but I'm pretty sure I will be soon, so I'm getting all these. These are the major kinks usually when you're testing, like relative path, because you're doing it some kind of virtual machine, or some kind of a, like BlazeMeter in case, also virtual machine or whatever running. So
Yeah,
it's new to me, so I'm very good. Thank you.
happy to help, my friend. Yeah, if you need more help, again, just reach out to support. We'll take care of your specific needs over there. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perfect. And if there are no more questions, let me give it a moment just to make sure. Yep, not seeing any more questions. So thank you all for attending. We really appreciated each and every one of you. We will be sending out an email with a recording of this webinar and a helpful link, so keep an eye out for that. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our support team. They're always available to help you out. And you are more than welcome to take a look at our blogs at blazemeter.com. With that, I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.